Oh, I just to let you guys know, I've almost finished my Soul Level 1, no blocking, no magic, no summons, and Dark Souls 1, and I have some thoughts on Dark Souls 1. First of all, there are some parts of Dark Souls 1 that are so rough around the edges in ways that I think actually make the game a lot better than their sequels. There are some parts of it that are so weird and so, like, rough that it's just really, really, really endearing, like, even on a replay. On the other hand, there are some parts of this game that are absolute fucking bullshit. There are so many hitbox problems, and so many poorly designed fights, that it's actually wild. I actually cannot believe that people accuse Dark Souls 2 of being unfair, because Dark Souls 2 is so much, such as? Do we really? Okay, so first of all, a ton of the boss design in Dark Souls 1 is garbo doo-doo dog shit. I can't believe people made fun of the capricious demon. What was it? Capricious demon? The fat demon thing from the Earthen Peak in Dark Souls 2. There are a lot of bosses in Dark Souls 1 that are literally just health bars attached to wastes of time. Just to a ridiculous extent, you know? There are also, like, massive issues with the flow of a lot of combat. Like, in Elden Ring, people are complaining about fights because it's like, oh, this one attack has, like, a slightly weak hitbox, or, like, this one attack is so punishing that it, like, denies you the ability to engage for a few seconds. And there are attacks in Dark Souls 1 that will just keep you from playing for like 15 seconds, you know? The charge from Gaping Dragon is a pretty clear and obvious example of this. The design of Ornstein and Smough is not that good. It genuinely isn't, you know? Like, if you're playing as a pure melee build, Ornstein and Smough is literally like sprint running around the outer perimeter of the map, trying to get Smough caught on pillars so that Ornstein will do one of his charge attacks, hoping that it doesn't bug, because it will bug 1 and 2 times, getting 1 or 2 hits in, and then continuing the runabout. They've done duo fights way better later in the series, you know? It's actually astonishing. It seems like they learned a lot after Dark Souls 1, the main game, because, like, Dark Souls 1 main game bosses are mid AF. They really genuinely are. Like, Gwyn is super cheesable, not that interesting to fight, honestly. Quelaag's an okay fight, but, like, would barely even meet, like, mediocre standards by the time Dark Souls 3 rolled around. And then you have the DLC, and it's just like, Calmeet, fucking Artorias, yeah, fucking Guardian, the Guardian lion thing, yeah, man, it's like, fuck! Triple the health bar, 2 times the damage, way more moves, way more engaged, like, damn! 16 times the detail. There are some trash boss in Elden Ring? Yeah, there totally are. Yeah, 100%. I've really, really enjoyed my replay of Dark Souls 1. It's also really made me miss the way they used to construct the old levels. When you're doing the legacy dungeons in in Elden Ring, it's like, I never got that magical feeling that I got in some of the Dark Souls 1 places. Like, does any place in Elden Ring elicit the same emotional reaction that you get the first time you loop through Undeadburg, or when you're making your way through Blighttown? I think part of it is the jank. I think a lot of it is the sort of rickety unfairness of the environment, you know? But I think a lot of it also has to do with how much more punishing the combat is in Dark Souls 1. In Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring, you roll so quickly and so easily that, like, anytime you're in trouble there, like, basically every encounter you can kind of, like, roll spam your way through, you know? As long as you're, like, decent about your dodge times, you can kind of roll spam your way through it, and reaction time will get you a good bit of the way there. In Dark Souls 1, there are some areas that are just fucking bullshit until you, like, realize what's going on. And the rolling is so bad in Dark Souls 1. First of all, it's not directional. You can only roll in 4 directions, so it's not omnidirectional. You can roll left and right and forward and backward. And it's really dangerous to roll in a bunch of places because you easily roll off the side of, like, Blighttown, or off the edges of the roofs in the Undeadburg, or in a bunch of other places. You can only roll in those 4 directions, which feels weird because it's, like, basically optimal to roll diagonally forward in every subsequent Souls game, because most enemies are going to attack you by swinging some kind of weapon, a sword or a tail or an arm, left to right or right to left. And that means you want to roll into it, so to the side, and forward to get close for a follow-up. But you can't roll diagonally in Dark Souls when you're locked on, which means that the game is actually 20 times better when you're not locked on. In fact, when I realized this, I no longer use the lock-on in Dark Souls 1, ever, for any reason. I just increase the camera speed so it's easier for me to track, and that way you can always roll whatever direction you want to, as long as you're not locked on. And it's so much better. That just improves the game so much, you know? But the first time that I played Dark Souls 1, I locked on everything, so that's only something I'm realizing now. It honestly makes me wonder if these games would be better if they ditched the lock-on feature altogether, or if the lock-on feature was something that got disrupted more. In the final fight in Ocarina of Time, I remember there's a part where you're fighting Ganondorf, and he does this shockwave move that prevents you from locking onto him while he's, like, floating in the middle of the arena. And because he, like, stuns Navi or something like that. Like, your targeting indicator is the fairy that follows you. The lock-on feature is good for slow, methodical combat. I just wonder. I don't know. I feel like Dark Souls 1 did so many things really, really well. And with time, Dark Souls, the Souls series generally, has gotten to be more like more traditional action games. Because the thing that originally made Dark Souls 1 really cool and interesting is the fact that everything was so consequential. Every attack was their death or yours, you know? Like, every time you wind up to strike, like, there are so many times in Dark Souls 1, early game and late game, where even with a medium-sized weapon, like, the decision to commit to hitting the attack button is like this, you know, because you know that if you miss, they're going to body you. And in the later games, like in Elden Ring and stuff like that, like, leaving aside the fact that greater build expression means that it's much easier to... I just feel like you can do so much more stuff in the later games, like in Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring. Like in Dark Souls 1, no matter what your level is, you're like this awkward, like clunky undead with a great club just making their way downtown. But in Elden Ring, you're basically a demigod. Like, you're so much more acrobatic. In Elden Ring, like, even if you're leaving aside magic, and magic lets you do so much shit, you are so much faster, you have so much more stamina, you can roll so much easier and so much faster with so many more iframes. You can transition to a run out of a roll and vice versa much, much, much faster. Your running attack is just much faster, and you have weapon arts. So, like, the enemies are still these same, like, they're just like AIs that you have to deal with. And then, like, in Dark Souls 1, you're just like this derpy potato dude running around with an axe. And in Elden Ring, you're like this tarnished demigod who's just returned to the lands between with, like, glowing red eyes, just ready to fuck up everything in your path. It's like, damn. You know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about, right? Oh, well, hopefully some of you are following me on this. Bloodborne better than Elden Ring? I'm more of a fan of Elden Ring. Oh, yeah, shit, wait, we can do this right now. Griff, I don't think Dark Souls 2 is bad at all. I just don't. I don't think Dark Souls 2 is bad at all. Honest to God, I really think the only reason that Dark Souls 1 is so good is because of the immaculate vibes and level design. You know what I mean? But a lot of the combat is clunky and bullshit early on. Not just because it's slow, because it's, in some cases, poorly constructed and poorly balanced. And then in Dark Souls 2, the combat itself got a lot better, but the level design kind of faltered. DS2 broke the parry mechanic to the point of being useless. I don't like parrying in these games. The only game from Software that I like parrying in is Sekiro, because I think that it's incredibly well integrated into the combat. Also, you need to. I don't think it's possible to beat those games without parrying. The issue is that, like, for the rest of the games, basically means, like, you can avoid a boss for the entire fight until you see them do the wind-up for the one attack you know the parry timing for. You run in, do the parry, do a quarter of their health and damage, and then, like, keep running and waiting for the next one. I feel like parrying is a good idea in concept, but the fact that you can, like, spam it on certain attacks means that there's potential to completely invalidate some fights. Like Gwyn, for example. Gwyn is a pretty tough fight in Dark Souls 1, unless you know how to parry, in which case it's actually one of the easiest in the game, which kind of sucks. Yeah, the shield counter in Elden Ring is good. What about guard count? I think those are good. I don't like using shields, but I think guard counters are a good addition to Elden Ring. Because, of course, guarding, even if you have a 100% resist shield, isn't free. It taxes your stamina. I do feel like blocking should have more of a stamina cost in general. Like, it should be something that you can get away with doing once or twice, maybe. But I do like the addition of the guard counter. I can't believe they stopped all online service for Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3. React to something while playing. I am going to need to pay attention. This is Soul Level 1, okay? Dude, I gotta say, man, I know that a lot of it is nostalgia, but holy shit did I enjoy my replay of Dark Souls 1. Wow, it is just a really, really good game. One of the things that Dark Souls 1 does to make areas feel a lot larger than they actually are is this game's fog. Everything in the distance fades off into this bleary haze. Even in the remaster, even though this game can absolutely handle the draw distance, it does make the area a lot larger. See that blur? Even that building over there with the columns. See that blur? Yeah, the depth of field is always active. This is a no magic, no parrying, no summons, no blocking. Are you beating every boss in the game? Yep. I forgot that it rolls to the side. I'm stupid. One thing that I really like about these Dark Souls 1 bosses is that they don't give you time to heal. In Elden Ring, even the most difficult bosses, you can always, like, run away and heal pretty easily. Like, even with Millennia, Moog, you know, there's always pretty obvious opportunities to heal if you get, like, if you can just run away from them for a little bit. But, in Dark Souls 1, like, there is never a safe time to heal versus Artorias or Manus or Calamite. It is always dangerous to try. Not Malekith? True, Malekith does not really lit up. Not in the second phase, at least. This seems easier than Elden Ring SL1. The HP seems to be more. Elden Ring has a much larger range of power. In Dark Souls 1, there's less power to be gained over the course of the But yes, in Elden Ring, you are like 20 times as strong later on as you are at the beginning. Whereas in Dark Souls 1, you're like 4 times as strong. Yes, Dark Souls 1 is certainly easier than Elden Ring, by far. The ridiculous thing is that the difficulty of the DLC bosses in Dark Souls 1 is so much higher than in the regular game that it makes me wonder if they felt like they fucked up with the difficulty of the original game. Like, the bosses in most of Dark Souls 1 really are not hard. And then the DLC comes along, and Artorias, Calamite, and Manus are legitimately quite difficult. Do I want to go in that building? Why not? I'm misaligned! Ah. Calamite is a broken piece of shit. Calamite's hitboxes are not what I would call, ideal, that's for sure. Who in chat actually played Dark Souls 1? Like, I know many of you have played Elden Ring, judging from the sales numbers, but Dark Souls 1, I mean, how many of you have really sunk your teeth into it? Bloodborne's my least favorite of all of the Soulsborne games that I've played. It's still excellent, it's just, I don't vibe with it as well as, Oh, hey. We deserve that. That was stupid. Ugh. Fucking rat. Oh my god! Well, so much for those souls. Wow, that was a lot of stagger. Did you see that? The rat pushed me back like 4 feet. What have you brought me? Okay. Here, hold on.
Are you busy dying?
Get busy living or get busy dying. Here. There's so much exciting gameplay happening that they don't get to see, because there's a cat, and that's more important, frankly. Look.
They can't see. I'm also trying to get...
No, they can see. No, you... No, you can do it.
Look at him. Look at how cute he is. I knew that you were streaming, and I haven't appeared for a while, so hello, everybody.
They say hi.
Ooh, he's playing.
Ooh. Oh boy. Ooh. Box baby. It's alright, I didn't die, I'm not mad.
You want the door?
No, open's fine. Ooh. Okay, we survived all that somehow. Oh dear, I didn't know that he could come up here. This is new to me. This is very bad. Oh boy. Okay. This is...
Swiggity swooty, he comin' for ya booty.
Yeah. I did not know he would follow you up there.
Broken sword jump attack only SL1 no damage when.
Nothing I do is good enough for you guys. Swear to God.
It's nostalgia, but DS1 will always be my favorite for its atmosphere. I do like to forget about the second half though. Need to finish to get a full comparison.
In terms of level design, the second half of this game gets pretty eh. In terms of boss design, it sometimes gets outright terrible. In terms of, like, the vibes, though, like, okay, just to be honest, like, in terms of gameplay experience, I think that Lost Izalith is terrible. In terms of how it feels to be there, though, that area confers an atmosphere and a presence that is just, like, unmatched. Yeah, Grave of Giants. Like, I'm just saying, I know Elden Ring took an ungodly amount of time, but, like, I want people to make games that look like this. With a good level editor, you could make games the size of Dark Souls 1, which look like Dark Souls 1, far easier than they were able to back when they originally made the game. It's been a decade, you know? Like, if developers could be like, listen, we have the ingenuity. We can make phenomenal levels. We can design phenomenal bosses. We just need to keep the fidelity low.
Not donating to Vaush is almost a war crime.
True. Just like, oh, there's the Moonlight Butterfly. Look, we'll be up there killing that in a second. What the Moonlight Butterfly do? Exist, I'm afraid. That's true, Mythaldu. I feel like it's doable. Pro or anti-pyromancy? What, in the lore or in the gameplay? I don't use spells in these games. I understand this comes off as quite gatekeepy and elitist, but I really do feel like magic is an easy mode that does not have sufficient drawbacks for it to be an alternate style of play. It's basically just a crutch. And I feel like it's a crutch that minimizes the relevance of a lot of game mechanics. In the Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, magic is objectively easy mode, at the very least. If you could retroactively change any one thing in the Soulsborne games, what would it be? I agree with Joseph Anderson in that this game needs preset challenge runs. Like, you can choose at the beginning of the game, like, no magic or, like, no Estus upgrades or anything like that. And that way you can stick to it, like, in an institutional sense. You know, like a formal sense. I've said this before, I don't have an issue with mechanics that make the games easier. I have an issue with mechanics that allow you to ignore other mechanics in the game. Maybe the mechanics shouldn't be ass. The melee mechanics in Dark Souls are not only not ass, they are sublimely good. I don't know what you're talking about. I've done it on Irma the Shepherd, and I disagree. But it's not about doing magic only, it's about magic supplementing melee. The thing that really bothers me in Elden Ring is that there's no downside to investing heavily in magic because, like, weapons that scale with faith or intelligence do just as much damage as, like, melee or dex only. Like, you'd think that speccing into magic, it'd be like, okay, well, you're going to be worse in melee. No, you're not. A full infill with Moonveil does as much or more damage in melee as like a full dex or strength or quality build. And they have the int to do ridiculous damage from afar with spells. Look, it's not about it being easier. It's just sometimes I think it allows you to build more mechanics in a way that feels a bit weird. That's how I feel, Captain Gwendolyn. I think that'd be a good idea, tying it to the melee. I don't think it's wrong to play or to enjoy magic in these games. I have, and I do. It's just that I feel like they're very different games. Does that make any sense? Like, a person who beats Elden Ring with melee only has had an unimaginably different experience than a person who has beat Elden Ring with summons and with magic. It's not just that it's easier, it's just a completely different game at that point. Is that a problem? Most games with RPG mechanics are entirely different games for different builds. I would say it's a problem if, like, some of the builds allow you to engage with the game's mechanics and some of them allow you to kind of, like, skip them or, like, supersede them, yeah? It's one of the reasons why I'm genuinely not a huge fan of most RPGs. I actually dislike this whole, like, every build should be customizable, you should be able to decide how to play your character. I don't want to decide how to play my character. I want the developers to decide how I should play my character, and then I want to do it as well as I can. You know? Yeah, it's one of the things I like about Sekiro. Like, yeah, you're a professional game designer. I'm playing your game because I like what you're doing. Like, if I don't like your vision of how I should play, then I won't play the game, you know? This is one of the things that I really, really like about Doom Eternal. Doom Eternal did have RPG elements with the weapon upgrades, but, like, no matter what weapons you use, everyone plays Doom Eternal the same way. You can choose to upgrade the machine gun or the super shotgun or whatever else, you know, you can use whatever additional bits you want, but, like, everyone's playing it the same way. Like a fucking badass. Everyone's zipping around, everyone's zooping and dooping, everyone's doing the fucking glory kills, everyone's doing the chainsaw kills, everyone... the fundamental mechanics of the game in Doom Eternal are preserved no matter how you choose to upgrade your character. But if the freedom is part of the developer's vision, that's fine. I'm only talking about what I prefer. I prefer very streamlined, very deliberate experiences, and I don't like the idea that there's like a really cool game that I'm only getting half of the experience of because I like decided to build my character in a way that just lets me ignore shit, you know, that just bothers me. That's what replayability is for now. Sure, but again, like, you only get one experience with a game, and it's like, oh, I played a game for 30 hours, but I was playing it in a way that let me ignore a bunch of mechanics. No, I just like deliberate gaming experiences. I just like things that are very pointed. It's one of the reasons I really like platformers, because platformers basically make you play one way. There is a correct way to do a platforming segment, especially later on. Oh, I also agree with Joseph Anderson in saying that it would probably be better if the poise bar was visible for all enemies, and that just became a mechanic of Dark Souls. At least all large enemies, you know. I've always felt like there should be a greater distinction in these games between two types of enemies. Ones that you have to take seriously in single combat, and ones that you can just, like, slaughter en masse, you know? Obviously, there are informal distinctions between those things, like hollows you can carve up pretty easily, but if you see a big knight, you have to take them more seriously. But, like, the idea of there being a mechanical distinction between them, like a visible poise bar that you have to take more seriously, I think that'd be really, really, really cool. Like, poise would be irrelevant, basically, for the smaller dudes, because they'd all get, like, staggered in 1 or 2 hits, and you could just carve through them. I don't know how to judge your own poise. Is it related to your stamina? Nope, only to your equipment. You can see the poise over here at the top. You'll see that I have 0. You can see the bottom of the 0 right there. It's the top marker. It's determined by the armor that you're wearing. Basically, poise is an invisible stamina meter that goes down when you're hit based on the poise damage of the hit that you take, and it goes up if you've refrained from taking a hit for 5 seconds, or if you've been staggered, and you're staggered when it hits 0. Yeah, you get a feel for which attacks you can and can't withstand, but there's no way of seeing what your poise is at any given moment, except in Sekiro, where it's made to be more of a mechanic. Yeah, I remember poise just not being a thing in Dark Souls 3, basically. Well, yeah, well, that's not poise, Lamondo, that's hyper armor. Hyper armor is a great addition to melee combat. It means that if your weapon is big and heavy, if you have a big heavy attack coming, you can't be staggered out of it, except by very powerful attacks. I like hyper armor. It's really cool. It makes you feel like a fucking juggernaut. Would you say COD or Halo is a better game than like Dark Souls or Fallout, given there's only one really way to play those? No, I'm not saying that a game... No, that's silly. I'm not saying that all games with like linear and non-RPG projection development are better than all games with RPG development. I'm just saying that it's a preference that I have. And I enjoy plenty of RPGs. You know, I'm only saying that it's just something that I appreciate, and I don't like the unnecessary RPGification of games that's become so popular these days. Again, this is one of the things that I like about platformers, you know? Oh, you know what's another game that did a good job of this? Hollow Knight. Because Hollow Knight's an RPG platformer. You know, Metroidvania, Souls-like, whatever. Hollow Knight did a good job with this, because even though there was some character customization to be had with regards to your charms, your badges, it doesn't change the fact that, like, you're playing the game the same damn way, you know? Well, yeah, Inkablu. I don't mind the magic system in Hollow Knight at all, because in Hollow Knight, to use the magic, you have to go up and you have to hit them, and you trade off for it with your health. If in Hollow Knight you could just spam those, like, soul blasts directionally with no cost, like you could just keep doing it over and over, I would hate them. Because then you, like, all the bosses that just sort of chill in a corner for a while, like you can just stand on the other side and just infinite spam. Be super dumb. Which is, of course, what you can do in Dark Souls. If there are bosses that just chill on the other side of the arena for a bit, or they have a long wind down or a pause or anything, you can just, with no cost... I mean, obviously you have a finite number of spell casts in these games, or mana or whatever, but, like, not so limited. Like, you can kill a boss with nothing but magic. Nah, too yellow for you. I'm not good enough. It would be very frustrating. I'm not that good at shooters. Yeah, I dementia. I just think, especially, yeah, in games like Assassin's Creed or whatever, do the RPG elements actually even, like, allow for player choice. Like really think about it. Like, in a lot of cases, it's just like, it's a way of dragging you around the map, like forcing you to collect trinkets so that you can get 5 stat points to put into some banal upgrade tree that, like, everyone's gonna do the same thing in, and you can fill out all the points eventually anyway, so there's no real choice to be made. It's just, how do you want to slightly improve yourself this time? It's just dumb. What about things like Borderlands? Well, Borderlands has more of an MMO-style talent tree that you spec into. I think I'm more okay with that because the game Borderlands is sort of designed around those archetypes in a way that doesn't compromise the... Come on. Oh my god. Generally, I think it's... At its worst, stuff like that is tedious, but I don't think it's game-breaking. The reason I harp on it in Dark Souls is because I think magic is legitimately game-breaking. Like, it compromises the actual experience of the game. In a lot of these RPGs, that doesn't really happen. In shooters, for example, I think these token RPG elements are more annoying at their worst than they are game-breaking, because shooters have a very, very specific core mechanic that is always going to demand skill, no matter what, like, weird talent choices you have to make or whatever, you know? Like, shooting is shooting. Like, what are these attacks from the rat, dude? Jeez, it's the fucking most deadly enemy in the universe. Oh, you can't come through, can you? Oh, no. Fuck. Absolute fucking asshole. Oh my fucking... Another big reason that I tend to dislike RPG mechanics being implemented is because it gives a really easy excuse for game padding, you know? Like, imagine you have an action-adventure game with no RPG mechanics. It's literally, you just have your abilities, your moveset, that's that, you know? In order for you to give people a reason to explore the world then, it has to be tied behind interesting content or progression, you know? Like, if you want to have people explore the big map that you've made, they either need to go there in order to complete the main quest, or it needs to be interesting to get there. Like, there needs to be a reason to give people a reason. But add an RPG mechanic where you can upgrade your health by getting, like, health shards, and all of a sudden...
What the fuck are you doing awake at this hour? Like some kind of degenerate, like myself. Do more drunk streams or get high sometime. I wanna see it. Love you.
I'll consider it, and I love you too. I will never get high on stream, but drunk maybe. Anyway, I was just saying, like, but if you like start the player with half the health bar that they were balanced for originally in the late game, and then scatter health. What the fuck? What the fuck is that? Seriously, what is that? He just, like, fucking no-clip flied into the air to do half my health and damage. Anyway, the point is that if you introduce RPG mechanics, you can give people a cheap excuse to pad out your game with basically, like, no effort, you know? Just no thoughtful... The best kinds of RPG mechanics in a game are ones that allow for horizontal expansion of your options without compromising the game's core mechanics. So horizontal instead of vertical. So horizontal upgrades in Dark Souls are finding new weapons and new spells, because it's not something being improved, it's another option being given to you. It's something new and novel. Whereas vertical progressions are weapon upgrades. Jesus. Weapon upgrades. Flask upgrade. This is sort of my problem with Bloodborne. Well, sure, it's a problem in all the From Software games. I like it as a spectacle on learning economics, but yeah, it's not the most interesting from a mechanical perspective. Frankly, none of the bosses prior to the DLC in Dark Souls 1 are interesting from a mechanical perspective. The closest I can think of is, Playlog is pretty good. Oh, sure, on learning economics. I mostly mean from a replay perspective. Like, are they fun to engage with, just generally? Too yellow for you. Dark Souls 1 is a difficult game. You should be proud if you've beaten it. The thing that I genuinely respect Dark Souls for the most is that the game is designed so that any and every enemy is dangerous. You're not patronized with any of these conflicts. In all of them, Elden Ring, Bloodborne, Demon Souls, any of the Dark Souls, even Sekiro, in all of them, any enemy can be your death if you get complacent for a second, as I have demonstrated multiple times here. What's your take on inconsistent fall damage in Souls-like? I think it's fine. It's never been anything more than the mildest of irritations to me. What's your take on the inconsistent jump button in Souls? It is actually, like, wild to me that in the earlier Souls games, well, in all the Souls games, really, they didn't just have it, like, the default binding for jumping in this one is when you're sprinting forward, you have to hit L3. Now think about that for a second. You move with the L stick, right? You move with that, which means that you have to be sprinting, and then while holding it forward, you have to hit it down. Now here's the issue with that, okay? For most controllers, if you have the L stick, or any of the sticks, whatever, if you have it facing a direction, it's actually really difficult to tap. Most games won't require you to have it held in a direction and then to press it. And the reason for that is because mechanically, the sticks aren't really made to do both of those at the same time. Because otherwise, every time you, like, jammed the L stick forward to move, like in a pinch or whatever, you would also press down L3. So moving it laterally and moving it down are different. But this game makes you have to kind of like push it backwards a little bit. Thought you had to hold B to run, then tap B again to jump. That was before the remake. And honestly, I prefer that. You hold down B to run, like this, which is fine, and then you, like, hit and tap it. The only problem there is that it means you couldn't go from a run into a roll without a bit of a delay, because if you just did directly into a roll, that it would do a jump instead, and you wouldn't have the iframes. I mean, you could just bind it to A, bind the jump to A, you know? Crazy thought. Sorry to go back to the previous discussion, but how would you feel if magic or pyromancy in FromSoft games would use Estus or health similar to how it does in Hollow Knight? Oh, I think that'd be brilliant. Yeah. Of course, the issue is that some spells regain health, like miracles, but I think you could bounce around that. Will you now decide between healing flasks and spell flasks? Yeah, but I'd want it to be active health. So you would have to balance it around Estus chugging. Cornflakes. I think the Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin is an excellent game. I think a lot of people sleep on it because there are parts of Dark Souls 2 that are different, that they don't like. Some of those things I also like less. Some of those things I like more. I think that it's a wonderful game. And I think that people are a lot more disrespectful towards Dark Souls 2 because it wasn't made by Miyazaki. You know? Like, I feel like if Miyazaki had been the director for Dark Souls 2, a lot of the different design choices they would have looked at and gone like, oh, well, you know, it's part of the experimental process. But because it was made by a different director, it's like, oh, he wasn't as good as Miyazaki, you know? Does that make sense? What would be the best part of DS1 mechanically? Probably the Undead Burg, Undead Parish, Lower Undead Burg, like, trifecta, in my opinion. I do really like Blighttown mechanically, though. In terms of overall best level, though, I think that the Cathedral of the Deep in DS3 is the best. Painted World of Ariamis is amazing. That's true. The Painted World of Ariamis is amazing. Best boss in the series? That's such a big question. I would have to think about that for a while. So armor is useless in DS1, right? No. Armor is the most useful in Dark Souls 1. In Dark Souls 1, armor is ridiculously useful. The difference in damage that you receive in, like, naked versus, like, full Havel armor is ridiculous. Not to mention the poise difference. Havel set's basically just easy mode for some stuff.